Guys, welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh, and boy, do we have a special guest. My main man, David Siegel, is in the house. What's up, David?
It is good to be a main man. I'm liking that.
Oh,
Good to be here.
I'm loving it. It's Happy Friday, my friend.
Oh yeah, every Friday is a happy day because get the weekend ahead
Yes,
of
it
you.
is. So look, for listeners who are new to the show, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. We're about people who are living their passions and those who are creating greatness in the world. And my man David is neither short of passion or greatness, and I'm so excited for us to be getting into it. For those of you that are new to Mr. David Siegel, David's kind of a big deal. So we got a big deal on the show today. We've had a couple of big deals this week, but David is the CEO of Meetup.com, and he oversees the global business. They have 52 million members. Many of you have probably partaken in the Meetup experience. They host 15,000 events daily, and they have events in 193 countries. He hosts Keep Connected. It's a podcast devoted to power of community, and he's a business leader and expert in building personal and professional communities. Man, we were talking earlier, like just before we got started, he's like, I'm on 5 boards. I got my book. We'll be talking about the book in just a second here. Teaches at Columbia. You teach entrepreneurial, organizational, strategic management. And we're going to be talking about the new book that's coming out March 8th. Is that correct?
You got it.
We're talking about Decide and Conquer, 44 decisions that will make or break all leaders, coming out March 8th in all major establishments. I'm so excited for the show, my brother.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah. So gosh, so look, in Greatness Machine, a lot of times, I'm going to say this. So David, I'm going to stroke your ego right now.
Okay, as long as my wife doesn't hear, because her job is to take it down, and my kid's job is definitely to take it down. So like it'll counterbalance everyone in my family.
I'm going to push it up. She's going to bash it down. She's going to pop the bubble. So for those of you guys that do listen to the show, I've always have an origin story on how I know my guests. But in this case, and this is why it's rare, and this is why I'm going to stroke your ego here, is I got cold hit up by, I guess, your PR agency that asked if you could be on the show. I don't know. I get about 20 of those a week, and you are actually the first person I've ever said yes to.
Woo, okay, I'm not going to tell my family that.
Yeah.
That'll counterbalance everything that they ever thought of me.
And this is what did it. The meetup.com thing was cool, but I love Seeking Alpha, and you were the president of Seeking Alpha at one point in your career. And I was like, oh, I got to meet this guy. This looks really interesting.
So I've been very fortunate to work for a lot of interesting companies, and I'm obsessed with community and the impact of community. So I'm sure we'll be getting to that later.
Yeah. So no, you're like this is like a 1 in like 1,000. And so, it's funny when you have a podcast. I started this podcast, I started this as a live stream almost 2 years ago. And then I turned in a long form podcast because I realized people don't like to watch live streams for more than 10 minutes. And I like to talk for about an hour. And so the vessel did not work for the ship. And so I converted about a year ago, but we've done a ton of shows and people are always asking to come on. And it's like, yeah, man, I don't want to hear about your like sales of your real estate business. It's not that interesting for me. And for the our not our guests, but our listeners, I want to add maximum value. And, like you have a great background and a great history. When I went through your LinkedIn profile, obviously you've done a ton of cool things. You're teaching at Columbia. You wrote the book. You're at meetup.com now. But I'd love, I always like to start the show by going back to people's origin stories. I find that for me, at least, my Gallup strengths, my number 4 strengths, learner. I'm a lifelong learner. My number 5 core value is curiosity. I'm a super curious person. And so for me, it's just always like, hey, how did you get to where you got to? Like you didn't wake up one day and say, oh, I'm going to be the CEO of meetup.com. That was a 20, probably 5+ year process. But yeah, take us back. Like, you've obviously had some massive accomplishments in the business world. I'm just skimming the surface here. But, how did you get into where you're at today? I'd love to hear the origin story a little bit.
Okay, so I'm not going to talk all about the sales of my real estate business then. I will kick that out, even though that's all about my origin story. I'll just go with something else then. That's what we'll do. Okay.
Nice.
So Meetup is all about building community with the world's largest platform for building community. On a personal level, my origin story is when I was a kid, and I still am. I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish household, going to synagogue oftentimes. What that meant for me and my family was that on Friday nights, we'd have 10, 20 people from our community, our neighbors, over. On Saturday, we had the same thing. We would get together as a community all the time. And I was just so fortunate to have that kind of larger village surrounding me my entire life, as long as I can remember. And I built like this obsession and passion for community, and why Meetup became so interesting to me was because of that. So we could talk later on about kind of the impact of community, especially around its impact on the loneliness epidemic that exists out there. But the other part of my origin story that I would probably point out is that my first job, Darius, which most people don't know, was in human resources. I was an HR manager, HR partner. And
Wow.
most people do not go from like HR managers to necessary CEOs, but possibly it's great training. And the reason for that is in HR, you're focused on recruiting top talent. You're focused on managing people. You're focusing on motivating people. You're focused on building organizational structure, figuring out company culture. Well, the things that like a CEO focuses on typically is that. Exactly.
All three.
Exactly.
You want to hear what I tell people? I say there's three things that your job is if you're going to be a CEO. And I've been a CEO my entire career. I said you own three things, and if you get these three things right, you're the best. And when these three things are broken, it's your fault. You own the strategy, you own the culture, you own who's sitting on the bench, the people. That's it. And any problem that comes out of those three, it's your fault. And anything that's good, good job.
And by the way, if you try to get over involved in anything besides those three, you're probably not doing a good job, because that's why you hire your team to be in charge of.
Totally.
And it's all about what Jim Collins said: first who, then what. Figure out the right people, and then kind of get out of their way and help to support and enable their success. So I started off in HR, and then as an HR person, I was actually at DoubleClick, which was a well-known early 1990s bubble. When I joined, the stock was at 30. 6 months later, it went up to 300. We're talking about the stock, 1999 internet bubble days. And then it went back down within 6 months, back down to like, 15. So that was a kind of a crazy time period. But one of my big awareness moments at DoubleClick was that I was the HR support person for the CEO and the general manager of the largest business. And what I found was that I was always advising on how do you motivate better? How do you build culture better? How do you hire better people? But ultimately, the final decision maker for all that was not me. I was a facilitation role. And I said, I don't want to just be in that facilitation role. I want to be the person that's actually making that decision and owning that responsibility and accountable, for the results. And that's when I decided to go to business school and start a career more focused in business and business development and general management and marketing and the things that I did. So I went to Wharton for business school. And then, just as a matter of coincidence, 20 years later, the CEO of DoubleClick, I kid you not, Darius, became my advisor and my mentor for 20 years and is the person who ended up acquiring Meetup out of Wework about 2 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that.
Everything goes full circle.
Yeah. So when you were at DoubleClick, you essentially reported to the person that reported to that CEO. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. I reported to a guy named David Rosenblatt, who actually then became the CEO of DoubleClick. And the CEO of DoubleClick at the time is Kevin Ryan. Kevin Ryan then went on to found MongoDB, the Gilt Group, Zola, and Business Insider, and started a VC firm called AliCorp. Then I kept in touch with him throughout 20 years. And then when WeWork was looking to divest Meetup and Adam Neumann was looking to move on because it was kind of blowing up,
right?
I called Kevin and he's like, you know what? I don't have an ability to do any due diligence. I know you're about to get sold. Let me just fund the acquisition because I trust you, and let's make it happen. So, things always work in full circles.
I totally forgot that WeWork bought meetup.com. I mean, which from a strategic standpoint makes tons of sense, but I totally forgot that. So when you were working, so you've been at Meetup now, what, for 5 years, 6 years?
Nope. I've been at Meetup for close to 4 years.
Sorry, 4 years, 2018. So I was thinking of your professorship. So you've been there for 4 years. WeWork was blowing up, what, like 3 years ago is when?
Exactly. 3 years ago. So the first 6 to 12 months were like exciting. It's like, oh my God, our valuation is $47 billion. Crazy. Get to spend time with Adam Neumann and go on plane rides with him and, learn about, the rise of this amazing kind of quote unquote tech company. And then we suddenly started seeing 47 billion valuation, 40 billion valuation, 30, 20, 10. And then kind of watching WeWork melt down. and them telling us that they were decided that Meetup was going to be up for sale. And I was originally hired as the first CEO of Meetup after the founders. The founder had been running the company for 16 years.
Right.
We're about to hit our 20th anniversary in a few months. And that's also never easy to take over a company from a 16-year founder. So
yeah,
been a ride.
So what? So you took over in 18 from a 16-year founder. Obviously, there's a massive like maybe not value shift, but cultural shift because it's a different leader, right? So if you own the culture, you own the strategy, you own the people, and the previous person that was there built the strategy, built the culture, and built the people. How was that handoff for you? Was that handoff like was it a smooth transition or was it kind of a rough road?
There's always a rough road. It was smoother than it certainly could have been, which could have been terrible. But I think when you're talking about a situation where I'm taking over for the founder where Meetup was his baby and he built every element of it, the executive team that he surrounded himself with, as most founders do, is they surround themselves with people who have complementary skills to the founder. So the founder is, let's say, disorganized or is much more of a vision person, then he or she will surround themselves with people who are more operational oriented. But when a new CEO comes in, the entire puzzle gets all messed up because I'm very different than Scott Heiferman, the founder. He's great in certain things, much better than I am. And I'm stronger in other areas. So the complementary nature between the executive team that he had supporting him is very different than mine. So again, on the first who then what concept that we talked about earlier, and people within 6 months, well, I had about 10 or 12 direct reports. Within 6 months, only one was the same direct report.
I have a name for that. You want to hear what it's called?
Love it. Let's hear it.
I call it the Red Wedding.
Explain.
Have you ever watched the Game of Thrones?
I got to start watching it, but
okay.
I know I suck. I know.
No, so there's this. No, you don't suck. But it's if you had seen Game of Thrones, what I just said, you would have laughed really hard.
Okay.
So there's a scene. I think it's end of season 2, where there's a family there. The family from the north is like marrying another family, and they have this behind closed door like wedding, and they're like celebrating after the wedding. It's the last season. It's this last episode of season 2, and they like close the doors, and all of a sudden they basically murder the entire family.
Yeah, that was basically us on the executive team.
Yeah. So when you're like when you were getting started, I'm like, I bet you he red wedding everybody. Like, and it's nothing against them.
No, they're great people.
They're wonderful people. It's a new culture, and they're used to the way it was always done. And so I've always said with mergers, and I've done a couple mergers in my life, and I learned the first time I go in there and play nice and try to keep everybody and was working like triple time to get them to like acquiesce to the change. It was like painful. And so I went to my business partner, and the second time around I said, I'm never doing that again. It's red wedding. Just go in there, give them one chance. If they don't want to acquiesce, you give them their pink slip, pay them severance, and tell them it's done.
Yeah, and really, we made decisions and changes extraordinary early, and the result of that, of course, is the domino impact. Then, when every person loses their manager's manager, there's chaos, right?
Totally.
So, is that clean? No, but had we done clean, it would have taken like 2 or 3 times longer to make change management happen. And the best thing to do in change management, just got to pull that Band-Aid off as fast and potentially as painful as possible to start the healing and start everything up quickly. Or else, as you said, rather than focusing on your customers, rather than focusing on your product, you're spending all of your time focusing on like internal obvious things that should take a 5-second conversation. Instead, it takes 5 weeks to like draw consensus. And you get it.
Red wedding, baby. Red wedding. So you went in there and you had to do the proverbial red wedding, and then now you're in the big time, baby. You're hanging out with the head of Wework, flying in PJs, doing all the cool stuff, all the stuff that he's now infamous for. What was your experience? Like, what was your first impression of that entire scene? I guess when you first got there, obviously it was awesome.
Yeah.
The big valuation behind it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're allowed to talk about this now, but were you like, this guy's nuts, or like, this is like total like smoke and mirrors? Like, what did you start? Did you think anything like that?
Oh, I mean, I knew that he and the business was just total nuts from the start. And I also know that when you're interviewing, people like to hire people similar to themselves.
Right.
So the more nuts that I could be, like during the interview process with Adam and with the other executives, the higher likelihood they would end up hiring me. So, during an interview, for example, I walked into WeWork for my second meeting with Adam Newman, and I was wearing like a white button-down shirt and jeans. And I was like, wait, no one around here is wearing white button-down shirts. Everyone's wearing a t-shirt. And I saw out of the corner of my eye some guy wearing a t-shirt that said Meetup plus WeWork. I saw that. I'm like, okay, I got to get that t-shirt. So I walked over to him and I said, I'll trade you my $100 Brooks Brothers shirt. We're about the same size for your raggedy old Meetup WeWork t-shirt. Let's go into the closet, take off your shirt. I'll take off my shirt. Let's change shirts. Let's go in there. And then when I had my interview, I'm wearing the Meetup plus WeWork t-shirt that they'd given out when WeWork had acquired Meetup. And Adam's like, how the hell did you, get that t-shirt? Like, you're interviewing for this job. And I said, oh, I just got the shirt off of someone's back.
Yeah.
And he's like, dude, if you can sell getting the shirt off of someone's back, you can freaking sell anything. So I just kind of acted, somewhat fun and crazy. And, after 27 interviews at Meetup and WeWork, because I had to have consensus about like every single Meetup executive, of course, meeting me, every single WeWork executive meeting me multiple times, 27 interviews over 4 months. I ended up getting the job. So I knew things were total whack.
And 27, like from an age, like especially you come from like a Deloitte background, right?
Yeah, I worked at Deloitte. I worked at other consulting firms. Yeah,
and so and 20. Why? I mean, were you like 27? Like, guys, make a fucking decision.
And they weren't done after 27. After meeting our founder Scott Heiferman 3 different times, and I get it. This is his baby, and spending a full day with him, going on from one Meetup event to another Meetup event. Scott calls me up and he said, we love you. We really like you. Now, in reality, WeWork already made up their mind. They were going to hire me. But WeWork didn't want to tell the Meetup founder that they already made up their mind. So they needed him to make up his mind and the executive to make up their mind. And that they all, wanted me without having it be forced. So I said, okay, Scott. He said, David, we're going to have a dinner. We're going to sit down to dinner for a few hours with the entire executive team. And even though you met everyone, we just want to see how you interact in a group dynamic situation. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I'm done. I've had 27 interviews. I'm not prepared for a 3-hour grilling. It's just not going to work. So I called up the WeWork kind of recruiting person, who was like the 3rd different recruiting person I already had worked with, because, it's WeWork. And I'm like, I'm done. Either you give me an offer letter, you don't give me an offer letter. This is it. And they're like, okay, here's your offer letter. So at a certain point, you just have to be like, put up or shut up. And that was it. But it would have really lasted forever.
Yeah. I mean, you're like, none of you are going to be here in 6 months.
Yeah, I didn't say that when I was meeting with the executive.
Guys,
that probably wouldn't have been like, the right way to win friends and influence people.
Guys, what are we negotiating here? You're not even going to be here. No, I know. Hey, listen, you never go in with that mindset, but the odds are it's going to happen. So,
right.
So then you get in, and it's obviously a shit show, and Adam, how much longer did he last? I mean, he was gone like probably before the pandemic, I think, right?
No, right before the pandemic. We overlapped for a good year and a half. I mean, I did a couple of things. So one thing is I was reporting into the president of WeWork, a guy named Artie Minson, who is kind of the Adam opposite, just super high integrity, actually very short compared to Adam's tall, just amazing person. And I said to Artie, I said, here's a rule. When I join, I don't want Adam to call me for the first 4 or 5 months. I don't want to speak to him. I need to have focus on Meetup. I don't want to get distractions. I just need to have full focus. And I kid you not, and Adam's a tough person to, keep on a leash, shall we say. But Adam at one point called me up because he wanted my advice on a person that I used to work with. He said, David, I'm calling you. I know I'm not allowed to call you or speak to you, but I just have a quick question. And I'm like, wow, he actually really listened. This is great. And then once that time was up, then everything went crazy. But it was a big challenge. And the reason for the challenge was because WeWork had acquired Meetup with a very specific rationale. The rationale was actually on paper a great idea, but in implementation totally didn't work. So let me explain. And it's so typical of M&A, right? Sounds great, doesn't actually work. The
Right.
synergies are like, not real. So the original idea, the premise was that Meetup is the world's best platform at helping to build community. And Meetup is the world's best platform for helping to build community. And WeWork wanted to really stand out among its co-working spaces as like having the best community, the highest energy, the highest like events kind of going on in different people's offices. And they acquired us to create tons of Meetup events and to activate WeWork offices so that everyone would want to work in a WeWork because we had all these amazing Meetup events that were going on at the same time.
Got it.
I mean, that sounds totally rational and it makes like a ton of sense. However, when you take into account the fact that a good 20% of events or 30% of events are outdoors, that's not going to happen in WeWork.
Nope.
Second is many of our events have 20, 30, 40 people in them, and WeWork only had spaces for like smaller conference rooms, so we couldn't really usually accommodate that. Next, most of our Meetup events happen during the weekends when no one was at WeWork locations. Or any of the events not on the weekends happen in the evenings when people also weren't at WeWork events. There was only set numbers of locations of WeWork, even though they're semi-ubiquitous. They're really not the most convenient places when you already have other places. It ended up that roughly 2% of Meetup events would be relevant for them to happen at WeWork locations. And of that 2%, some are like the WeWork knitting group, the ADHD parent support group. I mean, like those are great things, but they're not. And we have lots of tech events and book club events, but they're not like mass audience, type of things that everyone's interested in. So there was this premise in the beginning. And then what happened is because WeWork spent $160 or so million to acquire it, the focus was how can Meetup serve WeWork? How can Meetup help WeWork? And then I came in and I said, hey, we need to put our oxygen masks on. Like the plane's going down. We need to take care of ourselves first, because if our entire reason for existence is leached onto WeWork, if WeWork falls, because we knew it would, then Meetup is going to fall big time with it. Yeah. So we had to change a lot of things to make us kind of successful outside of just serving our master.
Yeah, well, hold on. So they paid $160 million for Meetup. Yes. I was going to say, I'm like, that's not that much money considering how much I'm like, that's like a weekend getaway for that guy.
Oh yeah, that's nothing. That's a summer retreat.
Yeah. That's like that's probably like how much he spent on his wedding. But no, I mean, look, that's real money. Like all jokes aside. And so when you put the oxygen mask on, then right away you kind of got punched in the gut with COVID.
Yes.
Right? COVID, I mean, who could have predicted that? So you became CEO in what time in when in 18 was that?
It was late. It was October of 2018, and then COVID hit, of course, in March of 20. So about a year and a half prior to COVID.
Yeah. So you're just kind of getting your bearings, and when did they spin you guys out of WeWork?
In March of 2020.
Oh yeah. So they
divested, right? So that month, what happened was, it was a long process to kind of sell the company with lots of fits and starts of people wanting to acquire Meetup and then basically destroy the company. And then after all these companies started pulling out because they started hearing about this mysterious disease in China that could end up coming here, and the bids started going down. That's when I pulled Kevin Ryan in, and I said, okay, I think we could get Meetup acquired for an exceptional price. And by exceptional, I mean a very small percentage relative to how much we were paid.
Wow.
And at the time, Meetup was losing because of all the excesses that WeWork had facilitated. In fact, when I joined, one of the KPIs, the key performance indicators, was how many people you could hire in your company, how fast you could hire people. Yes, seriously. That was one of like the key things, was number of people hired. Who does that?
Note to self: is that a leading or lagging indicator?
Yeah, it's a leading indicator towards like future disaster, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm like a lagging indicator to like going out of business.
Right. So it was kind of ridiculous, those things. So anyway, so it's March, and the world's falling apart. You can't meet up in person anymore. We saw our events go down in China by 95%. in Italy then after that by like 90%.
Wow.
One person in our office was one of the first people in all of New York to get COVID. So we had to shut our entire office down. So someone's publishing an article, Meetup, which is WeWork's office, can't meet up anymore, shuts down the entire WeWork buildings. That was fun. And then we sold the company, and we went from an 18 million loss in 2019 to $3 million of profit in 2020.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's
so
huge.
Nice turnaround. Yeah.
Yeah. So in your first 18 months as CEO, you dealt with the blow up of WeWork, a selling of the company, and COVID all in the same time.
You got it. I'm a lucky guy.
Yeah. Man, better to be lucky than good.
It's funny. I was just wolfing down some food right before this podcast, and as I'm like shoving like some bread with some mozzarella cheese in my mouth, I say to my wife, people think, the life of a CEO is all glamorous. They don't know what the heck my life looks like. It's so not glamorous. It's not even funny.
No, on paper it looks cool, but in real life it's a lot of work. So now, fast forward, you guys, what do you think? What was probably a combination of cutting expenses? Did you guys move a bunch of events online and take?
Exactly. So we went from in our first 18 years at the time, not allowing online events because we were all about IRL or all about in person, and that was the focus, to saying, what is our mission? Is our mission IRL, or is our mission helping people to be connected? Is our mission helping to reduce loneliness in the world? Is that our mission? And clearly that's our mission. In the last 2 years of the pandemic, we've had over 5 million online events through Zoom. Wow. We've had over 30 million people in, like you said, 190 plus countries participate in online meetup events. And now we're a combination. We're currently 68% as of this week in person and 32% online. And it's totally varying depending on the country. So in Brazil or some other countries where COVID is still very high, we might be only 20% in person. In Australia, we're like 90% in person, for example.
Wow. And so you guys, I was going to ask you a question. Going back to COVID, did you feel like you guys were able to see in real time before the news hit? Like, were you actually a step ahead of the CDC in the news on what was going down?
Oh my God. We have these data maps that are so freaking cool by country and by state of what percentage of events are in person versus online, and how that's changing over time. And we actually see this information, and because it impacts everything, and people's sentiments and people's actions. So we have some really interesting data of what's happening right now. Not surprisingly, Western Europe is really moving a lot more in person than for a long time. And there's some countries like Argentina, for example, and there's some states that are not moving to in person, like Vermont, as much as they did, because I think there's more of a there's an enormous blue-red divide in terms of in person versus online, actually. But Florida and Texas, they've been in person for a while.
It's like, what COVID?
Exactly.
Quit being a pansy and take your mask off. We're in Texas.
Exactly.
I was in.
Although Austin is a blueberry and a big tomato soup, so
yeah, it is. But you do have. It's interesting. It's. I mean, I think it's more purple than blue. It's like independent more than anything here. It's a lot of just. It's not even either. It's not. Austin's kind of its own thing, because I lived in San Francisco for 17 years before I moved here.
Yeah, that's deep blue.
Which is that's indigo blue. and I'm hosting an event. So I live in Austin. I'm hosting an event. I'm a chairperson of this event at MIT called Gathering of Titans, and I'm trying to organize the event. And that's a very, very blue state, right? Especially Boston, right? This is outside Boston, and it's like. I'm like, it's like night and day compared to Texas. So we live in, news flash. We live in a country with totally divided beliefs.
Wow.
Right. It's painful.
Great.
So right now you guys are on this new kick where you guys are, doing a combination of in real life and as well as virtual, which is cool. Cause I think that the kind of different strokes for different folks. Right. One of my questions for you, and this is, I'm coming way out of left field. I don't know if I wonder if you've been asked this question before. So before you answer the question, tell me if you've been asked it before.
Okay.
So And we're like both Gen Xers, so we're like we have one foot in the analog world and one foot in the digital world, right? Like we're one of the.
If you ask my kids, I'm all in the analog world, but yes,
they don't know any different.
Exactly.
God bless them. No, we're the ultimate generation because we know both, right?
Yeah.
We speak both languages. So metaverse is here. And I hang out with some millennials and Gen Xers, and it's painful at times, but I mean, I was listening to Gary Vaynerchuk last night. Was talking about that 30 years from now. He's like, I remember when back in high school when there was beepers, right? And he's like, and the only people who had beepers were drug dealers. And now
I remember that.
Yeah, I remember that too. I know. I was like, oh yeah, I know the drug dealers that had them. But he's like, and now we all have phones and we can't live without them, which is really just a more developed version of a pager, if you will. He's like, and now everyone says, oh, look at those kids on their pagers, or on their phones. They can't get off the phones. He's like, look, 30 years from now, people are going to be sitting in their homes, strapping on their VR gear and just going and hanging out in the metaverse. Like, I mean, part of me is like, God, I hope that doesn't happen. And a part of me is like, probably going to happen. So when you start thinking of Meetup and going into the metaverse, I mean, I kind of believe that that's like the next step for you guys. What have you been asked this question before? Number one, and then number two, what are your thoughts?
So I have not been asked the question before. So you nailed it. It's a really, really important and great question. Here are my thoughts. My thoughts are that we are people with a DNA that's been built up for however long humans have been around, 10,000 or 100,000 years, however number you want to choose. We date back to like Paleolithic and Neolithic evolutionary man, where we were hunters and gatherers. And the only ways in which we were able to survive was that we had to be around other people. We had to have community directly in person. And maybe this is more analog than digital, but I think that it's the deep human experience in order to drive happiness and joy in this world, to need to interact in person. And as much as the metaverse will, and holograms and other things that will be created will very much enable experiences that are similar to in person, they're not going to be directly the in-person experience. And I think that it is going to be a source of frustration for my kids of their kids.
Yeah.
When they're like, when my kids are going to be like, can you please put the meta goggles in the not off the table and not have it on all the time,
Get your meta goggles off at the dinner table.
Off at the dinner table already. Come on.
We're having breakfast in the meta room right now.
I think it's important for Meetup to embrace meta, just like it's important for the meta world, just like it's important for us to embrace online. And we're actually looking at different communities and different platforms that can help to drive that embrace, because that is the future, but it's not going to be the sole feature. It's going to be a combination of in-person, some kind of maybe online thing, and obviously metaverse will be increasingly a big percentage. Like all of our video gaming Meetup groups, chances are, we have a lot, they're going to move much more towards metaverse type experiences. So how can we as Meetup integrate with those platforms the same ways that we've integrated with Zoom, or others? So that's upon us to do, and to figure out, the right crypto and blockchain type technologies to be able to make Web3, a reality for Meetup.
Yeah, I love that answer. So I'm going to take a hard right turn because we got a book coming out, and I mentioned earlier that I started this as a live stream. It was actually for my book launch, so I would interview a bunch of people, and this is one of the reasons I started this. And I was like, oh, I love this. I'm going to keep doing it. So I'm a big fan of people's book launches. Decide and Conquer: The 44 Decisions That Will Make or Break All Leaders, coming out March 8th. Tell us about your book.
Okay, let's going to go through each of them 1 through 44 right now. Just kidding, everyone.
Number 1.
That would be really boring. But what I'll say is that the reason I wrote a book is because I have been thinking deeply about kind of decision-making best practices for a long time. I've been obsessed with understanding people's biases, whether it's recency bias or status quo bias or sunk cost fallacy. There's all these biases that people have that disenable them to make ultimately smart decisions. And we're all making literally like thousands of decisions every day. Even deciding not to make a decision or to empower someone else to make a decision is actually making a decision. So I've been obsessed with the impact of decision-making on like life experiences and business experiences. But I didn't want to write like some boring kind of textbooky business book. I needed some crazy, insane roller coaster experience of life that I could tell like this story and use that story as a way to teach others about how to make smarter decisions. And then WeWork happened.
Yeah.
So, the story was so crazy around joining WeWork, even around some of the experience I had in Investopedia with Barry Diller, and it was part of IAC and other life experiences that I've had. But the story was so particularly crazy with WeWork that I literally, vomited out. Maybe that's not what an author should say, but whatever, a book of 75,000 words in just like a couple of months. And then, of course, spend a lot of time editing and cleaning it up afterwards. But that's what the book is about. The book is helping people to make smarter decisions. So an example of something is when people oftentimes say to me things like, Darius, I'm sure you've heard this as well. You're so lucky. Like, how did you get so lucky? It seems like lucky things just keep happening to you. Suddenly, you're on the greatness machine. That's lucky, and all these lucky things that happen. How does that happen? So the answer is you could actually, with smart decision-making, create lucky things to happen to you. If you think about when you make a decision, whether or not you're opening up lots of different options and lots of different opportunities for things to happen, or does this decision close out different opportunities and disenable great things to potentially happen? And that's kind of like a value in decision-making of how do I build optionality into my decisions so that lucky things can end up actually happening to me. That's kind of one example.
So would that be like when you're making a decision? So let's use an example. Let's say somebody had two job opportunities.
Yeah. Oh, great. Okay. So let me give that. Let's say someone's a finance major and they're super into finance. They could either decide to become an investment banker, right? Or they could decide to become a trader. Both of them, they can make a shit ton of money. If they decide to become a trader, then the number of options that they have available to themselves is actually pretty low. They're going to become a commodities trader. And the next job, they could become another commodities trader or a macro trader. Very few options. If they decide because they're great in finance, they want to become an investment banker. Oh my God. Now they could work in M&A. They could work and as an analyst. They could work in a larger company. They could do 100 different things. Everyone wants to hire a former banker to their company. So becoming an investment banker creates a significant number of options for yourself, of which then your background is then very applicable for. Becoming a trader limits the number of options for yourself, and then you don't have that many different other opportunities to then take advantage of. So that's a great example, Darius.
Yeah, I love that. And so when we start walking through, so it sounds like the macro of the story is the story of your experience with Meetup and with WeWork, and then the 44 lessons, I guess that were taught throughout the way. Like how's the story come about?
Yeah, like one lesson, for example, is before you even start the job, how to set yourself up for success before you even start. So I spent a week just meeting with WeWork and the executive team prior to even walking into the office, because I knew I'd be barraged once I walked into the office. How do you spend that first week or time preparing to enable success before you even start your job? That's like an example of one lesson. And then there's kind of lessons throughout the book that I faced that many different managers and individuals, entrepreneurs, tend to face as well.
And so when you start to think of, like, when you wrote the book, obviously it's funny you said vomit. So when I wrote my book, my editor calls the first draft of the book the vomit draft. He says just pour, he said it, and this is his quote. Yeah, he's an interesting guy. You remember Tucker Max? You know him?
Yeah, I do actually.
Yeah, it's his company. So
oh wow.
So Tucker was actually his company, and he's a friend of mine. And so Tucker's like, look, no one looks pretty when they vomit. So you just get it out of you and just know it's going to be ugly. So
it's the MVP methodology. Like in one of my favorite podcasts, Mark Zuckerberg is talking about perfect being the how it's important to be more imperfect than perfect. If you're not embarrassed by what you first put out there as an MVP, you haven't done, you waited too long.
Yeah.
Same with the book. You just got to be embarrassed by the vomit, and then hopefully it all works out. And
Yeah.
in your case, it did. Hopefully it will in mine too.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for it. But what's the quote? It's perfection is the enemy of progress.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So when we start thinking of this book and who is the ideal audience for it, like who's your avatar? Who do you think was like, hey, it's a no-brainer for them to buy this book because this is the book they got to read?
Yeah, anyone who is an aspiring entrepreneur or aspiring kind of business leader, this is the right book for them to help to set them up for success, over the next 5-10 years.
Okay. So if you're an entrepreneur, business leader out there, you want to get set up for success, my main man David here, who's worked his way through the ranks of many a company that you've heard of, is telling you right now, you got to buy his book, The 44 Decisions to Make or Break All Leaders. I'm going to, you don't know this about me, but I always like to support book launches. So I'm going to buy 10 copies of your book.
Dude, Darius, thank you. You're the man.
Yeah.
I'll get you a discount. You don't have to go on Amazon. I'll get you a better price.
All right. Send me the back room bazaar discount. But guys, listen, well, look, we're coming to the end of the show here, but this has been so much fun, dude. Seriously. I really love your story. I'm so excited for the book. We're gonna, I'm gonna promote this out to many of my CEO groups. So I'll take those 10 copies and hand that out to some of my buddies. But everyone out there, you guys need to go. I'm looking at it right now. You can get it where all major books are sold. Is that correct?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, bookstores, you name it, we got it.
Yeah. So guys, book launches are a big deal. The first week of books is what makes or breaks the book, at least in the first year. And we got to support our friend David here. So go out there, buy the book. Is there a website or anywhere where people can connect with you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, there is. You can go to decideandconquerbook.com. And there's different people that have provided endorsements in the book. Sarah Fryer, the CEO of Nextdoor, Taban Shachar, the writer of Happier. And you can learn about what some of the things they said. And you can just go to Amazon and type in Amazon Decide and Conquer and get the book there too. And there's also an Audible copy. And if you listen to the book, and a Kindle copy, and all that other fun stuff.
Awesome. Well, guys, we'll go ahead and we'll put that in the show notes, but please go support the book. This sounds like a fascinating book. I can't wait to read it. It's going to be on my reading list this year. And so happy to have you here. I'm so grateful to get to meet you, David. And thank you so much for being here.
I can't wait to meet you in person, Darius. That's what it's about. Thank you so much. This is so great.
We're going to do it. Guys, thank you so much. We're going to talk to you guys soon. Peace out. We love you.